All right, what's going on, everybody? Week 5 is upon us. I am so happy that Scott Pianowski is joining me here. Scotty, what's going on, man? How's it going?
It's going great. Answering a start sit question right now, which is part of what we do. Week 5, we should know a little bit. This October's my favorite part of the year because it's still early enough to make a difference, but it's deep enough that we have some data, we have some tape, we have some observations. I feel like we know a little bit now. Where the early weeks, a lot of times I feel like we're flying blind. At least I have a sense of who can do things and who can't do things, like the Colts and the Broncos, man. Thank God that game ended.
Too much.
If the NFL said, "Oh, you know what? Play until somebody scores a touchdown," they might still be playing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I feel like we have some answers now, Matt. I feel like we can actually give the people what they want, which is some winning fantasy advice.
100%. That's why I thought it would be kind of a good idea to do like these extensions of the week, weekly previews, because we tape these things, oftentimes for the podcast, the Yahoo Fantasy Football Forecast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We tape those things usually before we have all of like the injury news, and we have like a rush here on Friday morning. So before we answer some of those start sit questions, I want to somewhat quickly run through some of these injuries and obviously just get your thoughts, Scott. Starting obviously with, look, your fantasy teams might not change too much with Kyle Pitts not playing, but Kyle Pitts is indeed going to miss week 5 against the Buccaneers, which is obviously a pretty big boon for Drake London, who is really the only other relevant pass catcher in that offense.
Yeah, I mean, it was the three amigos, right? It was Patterson, it was Pitts, it was London, and now London's the last domino standing. Of course, they will replace Patterson with a couple of backs, but it's been a good year for rookie, I almost said freshman, but rookie receivers. Chris Olave has proven to not care who your quarterback is. He's just going to be good anyway. We saw Garrett Wilson have a couple of nice games. Pickens seemed to play pretty well with Pickett last week. I'm curious to see if Pittsburgh can show up at Buffalo, 14-point underdogs. And Drake London has looked like he belongs in the NFL right away. Now, even though the Falcons want to throw probably 25 passes or fewer, I think last week they didn't even get to 20. The market share leader is going to be London. He's proven that he can beat extra coverage, and I think he's an easy start if you have him. And I wish I had him on all my raw. I have a lot of teams that would welcome Drake London. I'd be playing him over DJ Moore right now.
Oh, 1,000% over DJ Moore. Actually, we got a good question on Twitter. I'll try to like mix these questions in with guys that we're talking about. Tremendous something or another. I don't know. I'm never good at reading these damn Twitter handles, Scott. Wanted to know, is London a must start this week? Trying to pick between Drake London or AJ Dillon for the last flex. That's a little bit tough because I do like the game script for AJ Dillon, but and the matchup for London's not great, but those target share numbers, the fact that he's been so efficient as a pass catcher against zone coverage this year from like a production standpoint, but also a great man beater. I kind of feel like I'd trend towards Drake London if it's any sort of like half PPR or PPR format.
Yeah, I need a PPR component for London to be the answer there. And even then it's kind of a coin flip because, as you said, I mean, the Packers go to London. You got to get up early again, West Coast. And they've got a core four now, right? We weren't sure what their supporting cast was going to be, what receivers would Aaron Rodgers trust, who would get a cell phone number, who wouldn't. And they've kind of put their flag down. It's Jones, it's Dillon, it's Dobbs. Talk about rookie receivers. He's been really good lately. And it's Alan Lazard. So we know where the ball's going there. I think I lean Dillon in that answer, but it's really, really close. I don't think either one is a bad play. I think they'll both do well. And I'm envious because the start sit questions I'm asking myself this week are not Dillon versus Drake London. They're a lot uglier, but I think they're both in good spots. I lean Dillon, but nothing against Drake London this week either.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Certainly looks like a good week for AJ Dillon to get in the box, score a touchdown, everything like that, and in a pretty winnable game against the Giants. The good news, Scott, like, hey, only one of those teams really has more than one fantasy guy that we care about this week. So for the West Coast bros who sleep in too late, maybe you can get yourself off the hook. It's not like you got to make any big decisions about any Giants guys there. But
and at least the Falcons were nice enough to scratch Pitts on Friday, so you can make your contingency plans. Now you're dipping in the waiver wire and trying to find a tight end. I just knew that even after Mo Alley Cox scored 2 touchdowns, the Colts were going to do the Lucy, pull the football away. Thanks for the one catch for 7 yards. I never blame Mo Alley Cox. I always blame his coaches, his quarterbacks, just the football gods, whatever it is. It's just there's some rule that Mo Alley Cox can't go off in 2 consecutive games. Frustrating to me, but I think we kind of saw that coming. Does anybody?
You and I know better than to hope for more Mo Alley Cox, man. I feel like we've been doing this for like
what
4
can
years.
a Pitts manager do if you don't already have? And even Gerald Everett, who's one of the guys I would point to, he's on the injury list too. I'm a little bit nervous about him, but Can you think of a lesser owned tight end or lesser roster tight end who might be a good solution for a Pitts manager?
Well, actually, Daniel Church, if the producer can bring this up in the chat, actually asked us about this. Hayden Hurst, Noah Fant, or Will Dissly in a full PPR. Like, those are kind of your options that you're looking at, right? And, Hayden Hurst has actually kind of carved out a pretty good role for this Bengals offense, which I guess we probably should have seen coming, considering that CJ Uzama moved on to the New York Jets. And I mean, hey, it's never a bad idea to tether yourself to the fighting Geno Smiths at this point with Will Dissly as well. Noah Fant certainly is not the answer here, by the way. He's like the 2 or 3 tight end there, but I think it's between Hurst and Dissly. And in a full PPR format, I probably, like Daniel asked us here, would lean to Hayden Hurst, who I do think is a decent alternative. We at least, this is kind of hard to compare different defensive coordinators, all that type of stuff. But we've seen the Baltimore Ravens blow a ton of coverages through the course of the season so far. And like last year, CJ Uzama had some big games for these Bengals against the Ravens when their secondary was similarly falling apart.
Yeah, not to mention the Hayden Hurst revenge game, right? Never forget, he was drafted in front of both Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. I don't know whatever happened to those guys, but Hayden Hurst was the first pick of that draft. And as far as Hurst versus Dissly, this is a case of, okay, what's more important to you, whether it's the way you like to structure your team or the way your scoring works? Hurst is more likely to be targeted. If you're trying to get a 60-yard game, I feel better that maybe Hurst could do that, has like maybe a 20%, 25% chance to do that. Dissly, you're just hoping for the touchdown flip. It's all goal line equity. He could easily have no catches or 1 catch, but he is getting looks at the goal line. And Matt, in a year where Matt Ryan's struggling, Russell Wilson's struggling, Baker Mayfield is driving the Panthers into a ditch. Who knew that Geno Smith in the year 2022 would be saving our bacon, man? He's made the tight ends relevant. Penny's been great lately. He had a monster game. I think Penny's like the poor man's Nick Chubb, right? They don't throw the ball to him a lot, but he's a walking 5.0 YPC. I know yards per carry is not the greatest stat in the world, but I mean, that guy rips off a lot of long runs, and Geno Smith has made Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf what we want. I mean, they're targeted weekly. They have a heavy market share. They're on the field most of the time. So the ball's going where we want Seattle. I think I lean Hurst because I want somebody who has a bigger role in his offense. And with Dissly, again, if you don't get that touchdown, you're probably out of luck. But those are the types of questions and answers that Pitt's managers are going to deal with this week.
And one guy, and I'll transition here. I want producer to bring up Henry Campo's question about Antonio Gibson because I want to talk about Washington here a little bit. Because I thought that like Logan Thomas would be a guy that maybe you could use as a Pitts replacement, but he is among a rash of injuries right now for Washington. A lot of news to talk about there. Washington pass catchers right now. Curtis Samuel off the injury report with his illness. He's going to be a full go, but we know Jahan Dotson has been ruled out. Logan Thomas has a new calf issue. We know he's coming back from I think came back pretty fast from like a serious injury. And Brian Robinson got into practice on Friday, obviously coming back from being freaking shot in the preseason. So a lot of change for Washington. Henry asked, should I drop Antonio Gibson for Damian Pierce in an 8-man league? I'd certainly rather have like the weeks of use 8-man league. I'd rather have Damian Pierce than Antonio Gibson. I feel like the weeks for Antonio Gibson, it's like that; those are done, right? Like usable, trustworthy weeks because he was already starting to lose work, and now Robinson is back. But Logan Thomas, potentially going to miss this game. Jahan Dotson going to potentially miss this game. I think it's going to be a big week for McLaurin and Samuel here with these injuries taken accounted for.
Yeah, you and I both mentioned those names in our bold predictions. We both expect the Washington pass catchers to do well. Henry, I want you to get Damian Pierce right now. You have permission to skip the rest of the show. Go grab him. Last week, Houston ostensibly got blown out against the Chargers. I almost called them the Clippers. They could be the LA Clippers. I don't think anybody would notice. Kind of the same star-struck franchise, right? We always think of the Clippers having terrible luck, and man, did the Chargers have terrible luck. But even in a lopsided game, Damian Pierce got his touches. They basically Burkhead had a touchdown catch last week, but Pierce was the only player on the Houston roster who actually had a carry. So it's his backfield. They've steered into him. For whatever reason, he had to pay his dues in week 1, but since then, they've steered into him. I know it's not the prettiest offense, and Davis Mills is certainly a quarterback with fleas, but in a league with platoons, in a league where bell cows don't exist, I know Houston isn't the greatest offense to ride shotgun with, but Damian Pierce is the guy. He's going to get 85% of the carries here. And last week it was 100%. Yeah. And they played him even in a game that got lopsided. Damian Pierce would be starting on any of my fantasy teams right now.
Yeah, perhaps even more notable than the carries part, which is super notable. he ran more routes and had more targets than
Great
Rex
point.
Burkhead last week, Dameon Pierce. So yeah, he looks like he's fully clinched that role. And even if the Texans suck, I think it's still like that sort of domination of the workload is good enough for Dameon Pierce. Speaking of Dameon Pierce, we did get a question from Twitter that I think is interesting. Like Damian Harris, Dameon Pierce, Jamal Williams, which of the two do you like best of those three, Scott?
I think I'd lean to the two players in the New England-Detroit game just because we know the Lions have been such a carnival. They score. They can't stop people from scoring. New England has to have a run-based offense now that they're so far down the quarterback depth chart. Not that Zappi was bad. I thought Zappi was actually pretty solid, thrown into the mix out of nowhere in Green Bay. But the Patriots are going to want it. Again, we talk about when you can reduce a backfield down to two. When they got down to only Harris and Stevenson, they've both been playable. They both have double-digit touch equity in their back pocket. And Jamal Williams is, I think I feel like he's going to score every week. Even the weeks that Swift plays, I still expect that guy to get a touchdown. So I would lean there because it's just easier for me to imagine the players in that game scoring a touchdown than Pierce, but they're all right around the same ranking bucket for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think those are the two guys I'm going with. Damian Harris just feels like, I guess because he's I always talk about like the life cycle of fantasy football running backs. Like he's gone from being guy that people want to get on the field to wow, he had his moment, to now he's not even off his damn rookie contract yet, Scott, and people are already kind of like, get out of the way for Ramondre Stevenson. But Damian Harris is a good back, man, and like still going to get a lion's share of those carries against the Detroit Lions. So I agree with you there. Let's bring up Paul's question because on YouTube, if we could, because it transitions nicely into the Bills, who I want to talk about here, because we have a ton of injury news with the Buffalo Bills in their pass catching department specifically. Dawson Knox, I finally, I know a lot of folks are kind of relieved they don't have to start Kyle Pitts anymore. I'm a little relieved that I can just look for the next dusty waiver wire tight end as opposed to rolling out Dawson Knox. He's out with a lingering foot issue, apparently. Jamison Crowder, we know, is out and could miss multiple months with an ankle fracture. Jake Kumaro is not going to play in week 5 with an ankle injury. They asked about Isaiah McKenzie here. He's not a lock to play, but he did practice on Friday. And Gabe Davis, actually, who's had a lingering ankle issue, is practiced in full. Got a couple full practices in this week, which I think is good to see. Scott, I feel like for this question specifically, number one, it's worth noting Amon-Ra St. Brown did get in a practice on Friday. So I have a little more hope right now about him playing than I did probably 24 hours ago, which is why we're doing these streams, by the way. And so I think you obviously roll St. Brown out if he's available, but if you have to start one of these replacement options, if McKenzie's on the field, man, he in a full PPR format with all of these injuries taken accounted for, I feel like he's set up really, really well.
Yeah, you answered the question the way I would. If St. Brown's healthy, I'm playing him. And otherwise, assuming McKenzie gets the green light on Sunday, he's the guy with all these other pieces moving out of the way. Crowder's hurt. Knox is hurt. Even just Kumaro, just whatever work he's going to get is out of the mix. And the other startable player in that offense that's kind of snuck up on us is Devin Singletary. Again, the backfield got reduced, right? Because they're not playing Cook a lot. They're not playing Moss a lot. Now, the goal line back in Buffalo is basically Josh Allen. Just like in Philadelphia, the goal line back is basically Jalen Hurts. But Miles Sanders has pushed the other running backs out of the way. If you had gone cheap on running backs, but you ended up with something like Singletary and Sanders, man, you're feeling really good right now because there aren't that many right answers in this fantasy season. There are 2 of them. But I like the receivers this manager has added. Unfortunately, I need a show-me game from Robinson before I can play him. I'm not cutting him yet. I got to give him another week. There's a lot of things wrong with the Rams. I said that right now Matthew Stafford doesn't trust 3 things: his protection, his secondary receivers, and maybe his own body. They look like an offense that has no confidence right now, and they're not getting a break against the Dallas defense that's really good. That's one of my picks of the week is Dallas plus the points. But don't cut Robinson yet. If McKenzie gets the green light, he's my start, and this is all predicated on St. Brown, of course, because if he's playing, I don't care if he's 70 or 80%, I'd have to roll there. But you're asking the right questions, Paul. Robinson is somebody you still have to hold. It's no fun to not have a guy you can't start, but you can't cut either. But that's who Robinson is right now. Yeah. St. Brown's your guy. Otherwise, pivot to McKenzie.
I mean, Scott, I've been an Allen Robinson guy for a long, long time. So I've compared myself to the captain on the Titanic, in the movie when he's going to go down with the ship. I'll be going down with the Allen Robinson ship. I did just Jordan Rodriguez, who covers the Rams,
She's
the Athletic. She's great. She just put out a good thread about really all the things that are wrong with Allen Robinson besides just Allen Robinson. Her and I spoke at length yesterday about this as well. So I'm not going to completely give up hope just yet, but again, I will be the guy.
I can hear Dido in the background. You're going to go down with the ship. There'll be no white flag. You're in love. You always will be with Allen Robinson, and nothing wrong with that.
I'll always have the good times. We'll always have the good times, Scott. But that's how
we'll always have Blake Bortles to Allen Robinson. It was basically, some of you. What was Rodgers to Adams before? It was basically Blake Bortles to Allen Robinson. Now we have Cooper Rush to CeeDee Lamb. It's all cyclical.
It really is. You mentioned Devin Singletary. I'm glad you brought him up because we did get a good question on Twitter from Mike. In a full PPR format, would you play Devin Singletary or Khalil Herbert? Obviously, some of this is contingent on David Montgomery missing the game, and I believe he is questionable officially for this week.
Yeah, I'm going to lead Singletary there, even though Herbert probably has a higher floor for touches. But, man, we're talking about riding with one of the 2 or 3 best offenses in the league. You could even call them the best. And the Bears, who, when I ranked all the fantasy offenses for utility, I had them dead last and got no pushback from our esteemed editor, Jason Klobaka, who's a Bears fan. So in fact, I want to put CFL teams ahead of them. I want to put college teams ahead of them. And right now they're trying to hide their quarterback. They're one of the many NFL teams that are 2-2, and they're not going to change anything. So I think like the Bears have like 1 touchdown to give, where the Bills could easily, against the Pittsburgh defense that's down right now, Buffalo could easily score 40 points. I want a bigger slice of that. So Singletary for me, even though Herbert's still going to get 18 carries.
I'm so glad we're here talking about the Bears, and I'm with you, Scott, because I just got an alert that N'Keal Harry's been ruled out for Week 5. Kind of forgot he was even on the Bills. I mean, the Bears. My bad.
Yeah, you've heard people are starting to complain about me ranting about how the Patriots could have had Deebo Samuel or AJ Brown or DK Metcalf, or I would have taken Darius Slayton. Certainly, would have taken Terry McLaurin. And even the first,
you're down bad when you're like, oh, Darius Slayton, I would have rather had him.
For some reason, the Giants don't. The Giants will play anybody, and they won't play Darius Slayton. I feel like I ask you this every week. We look to stash guys who might be valuable down the road who you can't play right now. I have a couple of Kadarius Toney stashes. Am I wasting my time, or at some point are the Giants just going to have to give him a shot?
I mean, he had a hamstring injury. Now he's got a hamstring injury in the other knee. It's just really, really
fight it out. Yeah, nice. So at least he's in balance now. I hate it when I have one of my hamstrings is bothering me. I need the other hamstring. It's like getting a canker sore on one side of your mouth and you get a canker sore on the other side of your mouth. I don't know.
Yeah, I almost feel
Darius Toney is the Giants' canker sore. I guess that's the answer.
There you go. Terry McLaurin, one of those guys that could have been taken over N'Keal Harry, and I know we just talked about him, but M. Hart on YouTube asked, and you brought up our bold prediction piece because it was funny. I went to drop my thing in my blurb in the doc because you're a better student than me. You got yours in ahead of the deadline. Mine was like at the deadline. I was like, oh shoot, Scott wrote about the Washington receivers and highlighted Curtis Samuel. I wanted to highlight Terry McLaurin. So M. Hart asked Curtis Samuel or Terry McLaurin this week. I'm guessing you lean Samuel over McLaurin. You give your side, I'll give the McLaurin side.
Yeah, I think McLaurin's a better player, but right now they're being more proactive about scheming to Samuel, and he's getting more of a market share. I do think McLaurin's a better player, but they're both really good. What you have to do, if you roster 2 players like this, they don't make a lot of sense on the same fantasy roster. So what I would do is go to the trade market and be open to trading either one of them. Don't pitch one guy the other guy. Just say, hey, got a couple of Washington guys. I know they look bad against Dallas, but give Dallas credit for that. I'd like to trade one just to get more flexibility, more, just kind of more diversity to my roster. There's somebody out there who has an injury problem or a production problem at receiver, and you can probably get a good player back who's similar. So put them both on the market. Maybe put 3 or 4 receivers on the market. Let your opponents decide who they want. I'm going to lean Samuel, but I expect McLaurin to have a good game too.
Yeah, this is complicated. I wrote about this in my stats notebook column that just went up this morning. And I have at least one team because I took Curtis Samuel a lot in the late rounds because he was basically free, right? And that's another guy that I've always got right at the center of my heart too.
Carolina, you're long-suffering Carolina fan that you are.
No comment on that. But with Terry McLaurin, like he wasn't necessarily like you say proactive target, but was guy like if he's there, I'll take him because I really am a fan of his game, of course. So ended up with a couple of teams that were at least McLaurin and Samuel are both there, and I have struggled with that reality that Samuel is certainly eating into McLaurin, but also like Jahan Dotson is a guy that has been eating into Terry McLaurin. Going to miss this week. They actually, their roles really overlap because they both are like super high air yards per target. McLaurin's air yards per target is up 2 full yards from last year, which I kind of think they need to blend all of these roles a little bit. So if you're just going off like what we've seen so far, which is probably the smarter thing to do, Curtis Samuel's probably the answer here. But if you're going on a little more like projection, a little more hope, and like more of like an upside guy, I feel like McLaurin is the right answer there. So I could see McLaurin going crazy, but I think if you need like just a safe, steady double-digit point in PPR, half PPR, I feel like Curtis Samuel's probably the safer bet.
That's
there.
A great way to frame it, that you may have to look at the rest of your matchup. Am I trying to get on base here, or do I need to hit a home run? And your expectations, the home run would be McLaurin. The safer get on base would probably be Samuel.
Yeah, 100%. Somebody brought up Treylon Burks. Charles brought up Treylon Burks in the chat. He's ruled out for this week. I don't think they've put him on IR yet, but is this a guy that you're holding on to at all, or is this someone like I think is too, or you think is too much of like a just pure lottery ticket at this point with the injury?
Well, because he's hurt right now, that just means that the picture is going to develop. We live in an instant gratification society, right? You take out your camera, you snap it, you take a photo, you look at my lousy photo, but I have it immediately. I grew up where you took your film and somebody developed it. You took a Polaroid, you had to shake it and at least wait 30 seconds. Basically, Burks has become a piece of film that you have to drop off at CVS and get in a week or something like that. And that's just going to take too long. I would not cut him no matter what. I mean, don't cut him for a kicker or a defense or something like that. But if there's anything else that's interesting to you on the wire, you have my permission to move on, because it's just going to take too long. He's going to have a prove-it game before you even feel confident playing him. So it's just too long of a development time.
That was my thing even before he got hurt, was that he was a developmental receiver. And I had, how many fantasy analysts out there, Scott, were this is the week for Treylon Burks. This is the week, like this is the breakout game or whatever. It's like, I think this is a guy that you need to see it first, even injury aside, needed to see him like not just play a full complement of routes, but like play well, because he's learning a whole new position. He played nominal wide receiver in college, but was like slot player, backfield player, getting a lot of gadgety touches, and the Titans were having him run real X receiver routes. So I like, if he's gonna I agree with your point overall that if he's gonna, like, if he gets back out there and he starts running more routes and stuff like that, then I'm fine picking him back up, but I don't think he's a necessary hold. Like if you have Kyle Pitts, for example, just random example, and you need to cut somebody for a backup tight end, like Burks is somebody I'd feel comfortable getting out from under at this point.
And even if he pops, it's a low return offense. I mean, their best pass catcher right now is Robert Woods, who in standard is wide receiver 50. Yeah, that means, although I actually do like him a little bit this week, but it's like in wide receiver 3 relevance, right? It's not like I expect Robert Woods to smash. They want to be what they want to be. And it's interesting, too. This is something they've always been reluctant to do. The last 2 weeks, they've actually thrown the ball to Derrick Henry. I mean, they used to just like give him like a token pass, a token target a week, but I think they've seen the light. Let's get this guy outside the numbers, and let's get him tackled by the lighter people on the defense. It may extend his career. Coincidentally, they've won a couple of football games. So, even when Burks comes back, if he does pop, it's on like the 27th best passing offense in the league or something like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. The low returns there. This is not like, even if the Jared Goff Detroit Lions last year were not that exciting, like they were going to throw the ball a ton when Amon-Ra St. Brown had that second half of the year breakout. The Titans will never, ever, ever be that team. So it just is what it is. Last couple of injury notes here before we just hit some questions before we jump out. Rashad Bateman ruled out, not going to play. That is a guy that I would stash. I wouldn't cut him just because of the injury. I also think people are being a little too ridiculous with like that Rashad Bateman's not been that good so far. Like he's had one good week, one awesome week, one down week, and then he got hurt in week 4. It's like, hello, welcome to the wide receiver position. That's how this stuff works. Give me a break here. Bateman's ruled out though. That's probably good. We don't want him playing through that foot injury. Zay Jones, the great Zay Jones, will play in week 5. And then lastly, I thought this was interesting, Scott. Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel said he's hopeful Tyreek Hill, who has a quad injury, can play in week 5 against the Jets. I did read that and was like a little, I didn't know that we had to like be kind of thinking Tyreek Hill was a game time decision, but little interesting because we were already getting a quarterback theoretical downgrade with Teddy Bridgewater. This does make me bump up my hopes for Jalen Waddle and maybe at least have like some level of contingency plan with Tyreek Hill if you have him as your top receiver.
Yeah, and maybe the new Miami coaching staff is going to be one of the few teams that actually gives us a little bit of honesty on injuries, because most coaches, I mean, with Bill Belichick, you're lucky he'll admit to you that there's a game on Sunday and where they're going to play it, you know. But then there's other coaches like Mike Tomlin, who I think is very forthcoming with injuries, and you know, maybe the new Miami regime is going to be like that when he talks about being hopeful. You know, that sounds like, you know, the old injury. I wish they'd bring the old injury report back. We're probable, you not worry about it, and the questionable, the guys you had to track. Now,
how much do you miss that P like next to people's names, man?
You never had to worry about it. And then there were some coaches who would still do the malarkey, right? Your Belichick would put 27 guys on his list as questionable, but now everybody's questionable, and we know a lot of these questionable guys are probably 95% to play, and other guys are coin flips, and we have to read tea leaves. And at least Miami has, in a league where not every team even has a good starting quarterback, at least Bridgewater is a solid, that donut tire we talk about. You can go 100 miles on Teddy Bridgewater. Miami certainly doesn't want to play the whole season with him, although you could even posit that maybe Carolina would be better if they still had Teddy Bridgewater, as bad as Mayfield has played.
I'd posit that, Scott.
I find myself almost wishing that Sam Darnold would come back and play, and maybe we're going to see that. But and you mentioned Baltimore with Bateman, and look, you hit it perfectly. Think of any great receiver other than Cooper Kupp. You know, Devontae Adams has had, you know, he's like the three little bears, where the porridge was too hot, the porridge was too cold, the porridge was just right. He's been all over the map this year. A.J. Brown's had some games that are better than other games. You know, just the way the receiver position shakes down. Now, Devin Duvernay has been a player every week. I'm like, man, I don't really believe this is sustainable, but he's doing it on very low opportunity. This week this week Devin Duvernay isn't a gadget player. He's somebody who actually has to line up and probably play a high snap share. And if you're really screwed in injuries in a 12 or 14 team league, I think I'd be proactively playing Devin Duvernay Sunday night.
Yeah, I like that call. I'm interested to see what his like receiving yard prop like ends up on BetMGM, because I think it could be kind of interesting. All right, let's hit some questions before we jump out of here. I'm gonna start with Calvin's and go down. We talked about Curtis Samuel earlier. We haven't talked about Chris Olave, who, you know, Andy Dalton's going to start another game here. Michael Thomas is going to miss another game. Jarvis Landry probably going to play. I would, as much as I like Samuel and McLaurin and these Washington guys this week, I like Chris Olave over both of them.
Yeah, more dynamic, and he's proven he doesn't care. Olave doesn't care who the quarterback is. He's still going to be good.
Love it. All right, let's go to Paul down there on YouTube. Next one. What order would we start these guys in half PPR? Breece Hall, man. Ooh, that's a guy I'm really more and more excited about as the year goes on.
You know, although I think Robinson is a sell high, I was talking about this with Joe Dolan, the great Joe Dolan of Fantasy Points. He pointed out, yeah, well, even if you want to trade Robinson, get the Texans game first, because he's set up to crush that game. So Robinson's my first play. Then I would play Stevenson against the Lions. I just think he has more touchdown equity, slightly over Breece Hall, who I'm really high on, and I think he's going to be somebody. Aren't you really glad you have Breece Hall? We're going to be saying that in a week or two. Maybe it's not this week. Miami stops the run pretty well, but he'd be the third guy, Herbert the fourth guy, and I'm envious, Paul. You have assembled the type of running back room I wish I had. So if you wanted to ship one of these guys to one of my rosters, you know, Yahoo will look the other way. My commissioners, they won't know what happened. I'd be happy. But Robinson, Stevenson, Hall, and Herbert, that's how I'd run it down.
Yeah. No, those are all of the like late round-ish running backs, or mid to late, like guys that really look like they're set up well for the future. And Miles Sanders, who you brought up earlier. Miles Sanders told us all not to draft him this year. Bad advice, Miles. You were a really good draft pick so far this year. We got to get him on the Eckler show to talk about
the last undefeated team in the league. And I got to figure the NFC favorite, right? I haven't looked at the BetMGM odds recently, but who else would you be picking right now? They look great.
They look awesome, yeah. Michael asked about thoughts on starting Amon-Ra St. Brown. We talked about that, but even if Amon-Ra St. Brown goes, I'm just going to play him almost over anybody. As much as I like Chris Olave, he falls into that mix as well.
Yeah, me too. St. Brown's in my lineup if he's healthy, but I love that your pivot is Olave again. You have drafted and or traded very well.
Deesh, next one here. Need one wide receiver, a running back, and a flex. We've got same kind of guys here. James Robinson. We've got Breece Hall. We've got Chris Godwin, Brandon Cooks, and Romeo Doubs. Man, that's an interesting collection of dudes.
Yeah, Robinson for the Texans matchup has to be in there. And I think Godwin, this just seems like a get back game for Tampa Bay. Brady's going to throw 4 touchdowns. It's going to be, were you worried about Tom Brady? Well, 4 touchdowns. I'd put those would be the first 2 guys I'd pick, and then I really could go any way on the other 3 guys. They're all about even for me. I'm curious what your answer is.
Yeah, for me at running back, I agree with you that it's got to be James Robinson. Feel really, really good about him. I agree with you that Godwin is a lock as well. But yeah, if you're going to sell high on James Robinson, do it in like a week from now. Okay. Like after he rips up the Texans. The flex is tough. I mean, I think Cooks I'd rank 3rd out of the rest of the guys, and then it's between Dobbs and Breece Hall. I think I'm going Breece Hall in a half PPR format. Scott, I feel like I'm the only one that, I know you hate when people say this, but I feel like I'm the only one geeking out about the fact that Breece Hall is averaging like 5 air yards per target at the running back position, which has actually gone up from last week. He's like, that's like prime. That's more than prime David Johnson stuff, who is actually since 2015 career average is the 2nd air yards per target among running backs at 3.38. That's a big gap. I don't know. Breece Hall's doing some crazy stuff right now. I feel like I want to keep betting on him, even if the matchup, whatever. Like I feel like he's continuing to make a lot of progress,
and it shows that he may be so talented that instead of this being a 60-40 with Michael Carter, who's a good player, it may be more like 70-30 or 75-25, where Hall is almost, dare I say it, like kind of like almost a bell cow, a quasi bell cow.
We'll take like maybe 3 more questions here before we get out of here. I got to bring up Ravi. Bring up Daniel Church's comment at the bottom here. Scott, if you ever want a new career, you should look into ASMR. You have a very soothing voice, but not in a weird way. Thoughts?
I'll take that as a compliment. Whenever I want proactive advice or career criticism, I always look to Daniel Church. So thanks again, DC.
If you're ever, not that you need a new career, but if you ever need a little side hustle, maybe an ASMR, you do have a very soothing voice, Scott. I agree with Daniel on this one. All right. Let's bring up Kobe's shorts, Singletary or Dameon Pierce. Interesting. We talked about a couple of these guys so far. Which way you lean in between these 2?
Lean in Pierce. It's very close though. I just feel like Pierce will get 15 to 20 touches, where I hope Singletary will, but he may be more in the 10, 12, 15 range. And the problem is every time Buffalo scores a rushing touchdown, I expect it to be Josh Allen. Glad you have both players. Pierce is my preference though.
All right, we'll end here with a couple of tight end questions. Isaac Alzen asks, would you rather have Kyle Pitts or Dallas Goedert rest of season once Pitts is back? I think this is a very, very easy answer, Scott.
Yeah, I think we talked about this Sunday night where we like Goddard even before Pitts had the injury cloud. And you know what? Philadelphia, I think it's easy to get scared and think, oh, wait a minute. Well, they have Hurts and they have Sanders and they have Devonta Smith and they have A.J. Brown. It's really crowded there. Well, no, it's just it all goes to their 3 main targets, their running back and their quarterback. I mean, they're not throwing that much to Quez Watkins. They're not using the secondary backs as much as maybe we might have feared. They're a little bit more narrow than you might think. It's just that the guys they do use are all very good. But Dallas Goedert, to me, top 5 rest of the way, and he would be welcome on any of my rosters.
I think I have him like rest of season tight end 3 at this point.
His efficiency is ungodly. I'll tell you who he is. I don't know if I said this Sunday night or not. Or maybe I said it with Michael Salfino on the Breakfast Table podcast. He's basically what A.J. Brown used to be in Tennessee, where it's like, oh my God, he's an efficiency monster. And we all think, oh, what if he got like the target share of some other guys? Then he'd go to the moon. Instead, you just have to go to, I don't know, Bakersfield or something, but you're not going to the moon. But you're going to play Dallas Goedert every week, and the efficiency is unbelievable. He's per snap, per route, per target. This guy's off the charts. Unfortunately, they don't need to target him 12 times a game. I wish they did, but they don't.
Yeah, he's awesome. All right, last one we'll take here. E. Jones Bones. Dalton Schultz or Logan Thomas rest of season. I don't know that Dalton Schultz is ever going to get like the compiler numbers that he kind of got last year. But I still feel pretty good about him as a fringe top 10 tight end. And with Logan Thomas dealing with a new injury now, I do not feel good about the pride of Lynchburg, Virginia that much longer.
Yeah, I mean, I like Logan Thomas, but I got to go with the younger player and the player that eventually will have the better offensive infrastructure. And Schultz, admittedly, they're both off injury, so it's really hard to know what either player is going to do. Maybe they don't have a floor, but Schultz has his best season to date is better than anything Logan Thomas has done. He's younger. He'll have a better quarterback. Those are great ways to break that tie.
100% agree. All right, that is going to do it for us. We appreciate y'all hanging out. We're going to keep trying out these like Friday weekly streams is, again, I think gives you a little more something, a little more clarity with all the injury news. And hopefully we answered good start sit questions all the way around. Scott, thank you for jumping along and doing this with me, man. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And I look forward to talking about all the stuff we got wrong on Sunday night.
Yes, and of course, if you do have other questions that you need answers, Scott does a great job every Sunday morning during FFL at the Yahoo Fantasy Twitter handle, answering a ton of start-sit questions. So you're a machine, Scott. I appreciate you. Thank you for doing this, man. Much better than sitting here and talking to myself for 30 minutes. I appreciate you, and I appreciate everybody else that tuned in and watched. Good luck here in Week 5.